Hey everybody, it's Micah. So today I want to talk about a movie that I watched today. The title of the movie is Hoaxed by Mike Cernovich. And the movie it's about fake news. To briefly summarize, Mike Cernovich makes the case that the news media has changed. And in the beginning, maybe in the 50s and 60s, I think he made the case that around the 50s, it was much more objective than it is today. But that since the 50s, probably since the Cultural Revolution, the media has gone very biased towards the left, and that the editorials and the news have basically merged over time, and that the media is essentially the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. And he says that the media attacks him, and they attack Alex Jones, and they attack other people. But if we look at the body counts if we examine Mike Cernovich's activity and compare it to the mainstream media's activity, we'll find that Mike Cernovich he is not responsible for nearly as much damage as the mainstream media, going back to the time of the Cold War, when the news media reported favorably about what was happening in the Soviet Union. And he, along with many of the people that he interviews for this movie, he makes the case that the news media has it's fake news. The fake news word came up after the election of Donald Trump, but actually the news has been fake for a very long time, since the time of the Cold War at least. But he makes the case, he and others, including Stefan Molyneux, Scott Adams, Anthony Scaramucci, Tim Pool, many other people. Hoaxed is basically like the all-star game of the alternative media. It has all the major players in the alternative media. It has, like I said, Scott Adams. It has Stefan Molyneux. It has Anthony Scaramucci. It has Tim Pool. Mike Cernovich, of course, is in it. It has Alex Jones, of course. And it has Laura Southern, many other people in the movie. And they all give their not only their opinions, but also their first-hand accounts of how the media has portrayed them in a biased and very unfavorable manner. That's kind of an understatement, but it is an excellent movie. It's a powerful movie, and it makes a very strong case that the media now is about narratives, and it has a narrative. It has a story that it wants to tell. The story is that the conservatives are bad, evil, racist people, and so although it will report very unfavorably towards conservatives, but very favorably towards, for example, Antifa, which is the extreme left. So the media does not treat the extreme right, does not treat the extreme left, Antifa, with nearly as much strong negative reporting as it does towards the extreme right, which would be the alt-right, the neo-Nazis, right, whatever. And that is, the neo-Nazis and the alt-right are not nearly as much of a problem as the alt-left, as the Antifa people. And he shows how the media, through its reporting in favoring Antifa, actually gives basically permission to Antifa to continue terrorizing Trump supporters and conservatives in general. And at the same time, demonizes all conservatives in the same light as the neo-Nazis, and tries to, and by doing that, purposefully keeps Americans divided. And the second half of the movie it's very enlightening. It has a guy named Hawk Newsome, who is a prominent Black Lives Matter activist. He actually, for a while, Scott Adams and he had kind of a dialogue on Twitter. Scott Adams basically tried to promote Newsome as the leader of Black Lives Matter, although I'm not sure that Black Lives Matter really has a leader, but he tried to promote him as that. Unfortunately, they had to part ways due to differences in how Hawk Newsome framed white supporters of Donald Trump. But Hawk Newsome does make a very powerful case for how the media divides people when really we could be united as Americans. So I think it's a 2.5 movie, and you can buy it on Vimeo. I'll put a link in the description of this video, and I highly recommend watching the movie. I highly recommend, if you have 2 hours, I'm sure you do, watch the movie, because this is a very heavy-hitting, powerful movie that deserves your attention. If you have any interest in politics or in just how narratives are created, the mechanics of how the news media creates and propagates a narrative, I think it's a very powerful movie. And the people in the movie don't necessarily all agree with each other on other subjects. They agree on the subject of fake news, but for example, Scott Adams and Stefan Molyneux have a difference of opinion when it comes to, let's say, some philosophical things. For example, Scott Adams doesn't believe that it's really possible to know what the truth is. He doesn't believe that humans have evolved to know reality. So he, his philosophy is not a new philosophy by any means. Although he does have one, he has a bit of an update on an old idea. He believes in simulation theory. Basically, if you haven't heard of it, Scott Adams believes that it's highly probable that we live in a simulation. That is, this is not real. It's all a simulation created by some higher beings, because it's very likely that as some advanced species becomes more technologically advanced, it can create simulations of real life. And then those simulations will become more advanced until they finally can make their own simulations. And so his idea is that we live in kind of one of probably many different simulations, and it's impossible for us to actually know reality because we're in a simulation. And Elon Musk actually shares his opinion on simulation theory. However, Stefan Molyneux is a philosopher that does not believe that that's the case. It's actually, if you listen to it carefully, simulation theory has a lot in common with the idea of the existence of God. And the main way there are two ideas that Stefan Molyneux says that he uses to kind of debunk the simulation theory. One is simulation theory and the theory of the existence of God share in common that something must have, if there is a God or if there is a simulation or there is a simulation, there has to be something that created one of those things, right? So the simulation has, even if it's simulations all the way up, at some point there was the original species that made the original simulation, which then caused that, the other simulations to be created. So there is that original species that made the simulation, and it's the same idea with God. People will say, what created God, right? If God made everything, what created God? And it's kind of a very similar situation. Also, Stefan Molyneux makes the case that even if it's a simulation, what does it matter? It doesn't change how we behave, right? Just thinking that, maybe there's some species that made us and we're just part of a simulation. It doesn't really give us any information that can help us act differently in the world. Anyway, that is just to say that the many different people in the movie may not share similar opinions about very many different important topics, but they all share the same opinion about the media. The media is divisive. The media purposefully divides people in order to make money. So I highly recommend watching Hoaxed by Mike Cernovich, and it's about, I paid 1,000 yen for it in Japanese yen, so it's probably about $10 in US dollars, and I highly recommend you watch the movie. Alright, that's it, and I'll see you next time.